If my mum had met my dad on a dating app, she would have swiped no. They first met at a party in 1976. They started chatting, and by the end of the night my dad had asked her out. She said no. It was only after having gotten to know him through various dinners and events held by mutual friends that she finally decided to give the match a go. They ended up married for over 20 years before my dad sadly passed away. When I quizzed her about what made her hesitant, she said she was worried that his cultural background as a Bangladeshi man meant there would be too many differences between them for a relationship to work. I just wasn't sure whether we'd be able to get along together. They did. They traveled the world together, and my mum got the chance to experience life in my father's birth country, something she loved and still recalls with great fondness. If she had met my dad on a dating app though, she probably would have turned him down. And herein lies the problem. Because if there are people like my parents who needed second, third, and fourth chances to find their way to one another, where does that leave dating app users? Have we lost the chance to not really know what we want but to still end up happily ever after? Love is blind. I, like many people, am seriously burnt out with dating apps. There have been plenty of good theories put forward for why, from the problem of too much choice to the large number of coupled people on the apps filling people's feeds with junk matches. But there may be another reason. A big one. Last year, Paul Eastwick and co-researchers disclosed an extraordinary insight in their research paper, A Worldwide Test of the Predictive Validity of Ideal Partner Preference Matching. They showed that the problem facing people struggling to find a partner might not be that they can't find someone who's right for them. It's that some of us have no idea what a right person might even look like. As he explains in a podcast episode with YouTuber Chris Williamson, what people are good at recognizing are some traits are desirable. There's a lot of agreement and accurate self-knowledge that some attributes are more desirable than others. The trick though is when we expect people to have insight about what is it that they uniquely like that makes them different from other people. That's the challenge. In other words, we can all agree that we want someone kind, funny and cute. But those unique traits that will create that giddy in love feeling in us specifically, much harder to pin down. This isn't a problem restricted to dating apps, of course. Plenty of people meet in real life and go on to have unsatisfying relationships because they don't really know what would make them happy. But the dating apps make it even worse because with so little information to go on, dating becomes an exercise in shopping for surface-level traits like physical attraction, something David Guetta and Girl on Couch glorify in their cult hit Man in Finance with the lyrics, "I'm looking for a man in finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes." It's taken me a long time to recognize the traits I would want in a partner: someone communicative and emotionally evolved, who has a strong moral compass and is as animated as I am by political and social issues. I didn't learn that from using the apps. I learned that from getting to know people in real life and reflecting on what made me feel good in their company. That's why dating apps are so flawed and why I think so many people, and young people in particular, are going off them. It's not just because dating apps have become an unfiltered swamp for all of humanity. It's because they're not creating positive spaces where we can learn about who we are and what we want from a romantic partner in the first place. Instead, we've created a click-to-buy system for one of the most complex, poorly understood and difficult to find products on earth: genuine human connection. No wonder it's a complete shit show. 38-year-old female seeks self. This lack of internal insight about who we are and what we want has been explored by organizational psychologist and author, Tasha Eurich. In her book Insight, The Power of Self-Awareness in a Self-Deluded World, she explains that many of us lack internal self-awareness, which she defines as an understanding of our values, passions, aspirations, ideal environment, patterns, reactions, and impact on others. Without that internal self-awareness, Ulrich explains, it's extremely difficult for us to make decisions that will lead to us feeling happy and fulfilled. How does that lack of self-awareness play out in online dating? Imagine a bunch of people desperately looking for a needle in a haystack with no concept of what a needle looks like. The problem is, most of us are deluding ourselves that we already have a good insight into who we are, with Ulrich showing that a staggering 95% of us believe we are self-aware compared to the 10 to 15% who actually are. This is why advice like dating is a numbers game or date like it's your job can be so unhelpful. Because it wrongly assumes people already know what they want. And if you're a people pleaser, it gets worse. Because we're so focused on how we appear to others, we can spend very little time reflecting on what we want for ourselves. As a 20-something, I spent years pretending to like boring indie bands and listening with rapt attention to explanations of the offside rule before realizing I was squashing my own personality into oblivion. I wish back then someone had advised me to spend more time developing myself as an individual so that I could build a picture of who I was and what I wanted beyond a partner's interests. The fact they didn't meant I stayed trapped in dating app purgatory for years, racking up swipes but no closer to that holy grail of understanding who I was and, most importantly, who might make me happy. Typecasting. Then there's the problem of bias. In her book, The Love Fix, Rachel Thomas discusses how racist beauty norms impact users' attitudes on dating apps, highlighting data from 2014 which revealed that users of the OkCupid app judged some ethnicities as being less attractive than others. As a mixed-race woman, I can relate. When I was younger, I used to go on nights out in areas that were predominantly white. I found, as my friends paired off, I would often end up in conversation with the friend no one else wanted, presumably because I was also the friend no one else wanted. Looking back, I wonder if my ethnicity was partly why. My white friends were simply more appealing to a group of white men. Ethnicity isn't the only bias, of course. There are many others: age, height, class, education level, hair color. And whilst it's important we honor ourselves and what we want, love, ultimately, is an expression of the heart's desire, not an act of philanthropy. It's also important to be aware that love can transcend biases given the chance. Sadly, dating apps rarely give us that chance because they have been designed to afford us maximum control, which allows us to cleave to our biases even more tightly than if we were interacting with people in real life. I can not only ignore someone who doesn't match my preferred height, I can amend my settings so that I don't even have to see them. But in doing that we may be missing out on something really quite profound. Because one of the most beautiful qualities of love, whether romantic or platonic, is how educational it can be. To get to know others is to feel their humanity, and to feel the humanity of another person is to create a chink of light in which love can grow. Dating apps, in all their ruthless efficiency, may actually be robbing us of a gift, the opportunity to be educated, to be proven wrong, to think we know what we want, and to be dumbfounded in the most wonderfully disarming and life-changing way, just like my mum was. No happily ever afters. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice might be one of the most cherished love stories of all time. In it, the upstanding but haughty Mark Darcy is overheard making rude remarks at a party by the witty but hot-headed Elizabeth Bennet, who instantly takes against him. What follows is the story of two people forced to re-evaluate their behaviors, biases and beliefs about one another as they gradually and unexpectedly fall in love. The reason this story is so captivating is not because two people fall in love. It's because it speaks to the ignorance of human beings and the power of love as a force that can change us and make us better, more evolved versions of ourselves. This is why I think dating apps so often fail. They're founded on the idea that, if you design the right conditions, finding love can be as simple as picking up a carton of milk, that all we need to do is sift through a conveyor belt of faces like panning for gold. But it's so much more complicated than that. The journey towards finding love is not a search party, it is a developmental process whereby we learn about ourselves, about others and, over time, about the kinds of people who might make us happy. It is an education, an enlightening, an expansion of the self. You're not going to find that in an app. You might find a man in finance though.